So. And that's you, I believe. So you can work your magic.
What about the project? So I should share screen or do I just stand somewhere for the Zoom?
Yeah, you know what to say. Move the camera, so just do your thing.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll all be good.
Okay, so I worked as a sports science intern for Clemson Olympic Sports since August. I'm going to continue to work there through next August as well. Just a little bit of background. Clemson Olympic Sports, that's all of our Division I sports. That's soccer, tennis, baseball, softball, track, lacrosse, gymnastics. Does not include football, and does not include basketball. How we have this set up is there's 10 to 15 interns ranging from undergrad to grads, and we are each assigned, a few of us are assigned to a sport. So I work on the men and women's soccer teams with a grad assistant, just assisting her and all of the projects we're working on. So just a little bit of background, kind of like more of a formal definition of what sports science is. Just from a textbook, actually, it is the application of scientific theory to sport using the scientific methods of inquiry in the fields of human performance, athletic endeavor, and sporting competition. So that's very formal. A little bit of an informal definition would be like sports science is kind of like a sports scientist would be like the wearer of many hats. So you have your data analysis, you have your maybe your bioengineering, biomechanics, maybe sports nutrition, medicine, strength and conditioning. And then at Clemson Sports Science, this is kind of what we kind of could, and I kind of work with the data integration and analytics side of that. So with my project group, so with me and the grad assistant, kind of with working with the soccer teams, some of our goals is with our projects is just finding some trends in the data. I know that's very general. I'll kind of get into that more, but like our biggest trend is kind of like what wins games and what loses games. So we look at that across all forms of data. We have GPS data. We have like more statistical data where it's like passing, goals scored, tools. And then we also have a lot of projects where we kind of just organize data. So we have a lot of data just across a bunch of collection methods. And sometimes we just need to break that down into an Excel sheet that's easier to read for coaching staff. Just because sometimes when you're a data collection source, the data is just not how you want it. It doesn't go with too much of depth if you want to look at a team breakdown or individual breakdown. Yeah, so some of the projects we worked on, batch summaries, weekly reports, statistical summaries, reports, and work rates. I'll talk a little about that. So metrics I'm going to be talking about is from our Catapult data. So Catapult is our GPS data. It is a wearable technology that you guys seen some athletes wear. It's kind of like a sports bra, and it collects a lot of speed and velocity metrics for us. The most important metric we look at is player load. You can think of this as kind of like a workload metric, defined by Catapult as the sum of accelerations across all the axes of internal accelerometer during movement. And then we kind of have our high speeds that they record as well. So our which shows like amount of meters traveled or miles traveled at a certain speed, and kind of broke those down for women's soccer and men's soccer. I'm going to go into our accelerations, which again defined by Catapult is how quickly an athlete can accelerate, decelerate greater than the acceleration threshold for at least 1 second. And then some of the platforms we use to build to our projects. And I included the formula for player load. That's how Catapult calculates it. I don't calculate it, it's just a data given to me, but I thought that was interesting. So we're going to talk a little bit about some projects I did for women's soccer. Just some background with that. For our women's team in the spring, we kind of focused on looking at some speed and velocity metrics in Catapult, just because the game of women's soccer is increasingly getting faster, and we just kind of want to see how that works with how we play. So one thing that we did some match reports for our ACC opponents and our non-ACC opponents, such as Notre Dame. Our goal with this was not only to give a match report, like a little summary of the game, but kind of break it down positionally by our catapult metrics. And I know that's kind of tough to see, so yeah, this is going to be forwards, midfielder defense, forward midfielders defense, across all metrics. And we just kind of want to see if our play is slowing down in the second half. And I picked a report that we did that it was, so we could see between the orange and the purple, we see a decrease in most of the metrics. And then we see our speed table where we don't see, which is this right here, we don't see too much discrepancy between the halves. And then we also have the fastest of the game table where I blocked out the names just for privacy reasons, but we have our top players who have the highest speed during the game, how many sprints they had over 13 miles an hour. Just kind of to show us that, like essentially, like we can't access other teams' speed data, so we can't really compare ourselves to other teams. So we have to really look at our own data and see how that impacts our play. It's a good report to give to coaching staffs in terms of like they have this on record now. When I look back at the game, they can see the top speeds. They can see the positional breakdown. So, the other thing we did with women's soccer was kind of essentially the same thing, but more of a leaderboard. So we have every day between August and November in this report, just all of our season data, and it automatically ranks the players' highest, lowest metric. You can select any date range, and you can select any position, and it will just kind of print the numbers. But again, this is just a good way to have our speed metrics displayed in a way where it's easy for staff to just like be able to look back on it on a certain day, a certain game, instead of just being like how it already is in Catapult. It's just like an easier, nicer way to look at that. Kind of going into a little bit of the men's soccer projects. One thing that we look at a lot with the men's team is workload, which I kind of talked about in the beginning. One project that we're still kind of working on is kind of like a little Excel database where we could break down all of our catapult metrics. So that's our player loads, our mileage, our velocities, our accelerations, and we break them down individually. So this is one player's mileage breakdown and their ranking analysis to follow. So we have all of their games listed, and then we have their we have mileage, and we're breaking that into meters per minute. And then we rank their top 3 games by 15-minute interval, and their lowest 3 games, kind of just to show where some certain trends are with, like if a certain player is having good 15-minute intervals, or if a certain position is for these games. It also just serves as a good way again to keep breaking down those games, so we can get a little bit more than just the general data that Catapult gives us. Last thing to talk about today is a weekly report we did for the men's soccer team. It's kind of like a total player load comparison where right here scribbled out in black are our high minute players, and we take our total player load for a few weeks and just kind of compare them with these colors. This is their sum for the week, and then we can see the percent change between the weeks. And then we can see the daily TPL and mileage average for the team, and how that looks like compared to our 2021 norms. So the purpose of having a norm is when we look at a match, we want to see what the norm is for 2 days out from the match and 1 day out from the match, and kind of just compare with ourselves to 2021. We're not necessarily trying to hit that norm, but it's just kind of helpful in the sense to kind of see where we're at. And yeah, this is just a helpful report for coaching staff to get like a little brief recap of the week. And I just want to say thank you to my boss, Dr. Jason Abadesian, Katie Wright, the grad assistant that helped me, Erica Troutman and Michael Bruno for the opportunity to be part of this team, and collaboration, assistance, and training on all projects. So thank you guys.
Any questions? Oh, I have an intriguing question. So do you know what, so you put up the stuff with, you all in Notre Dame, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea what they're doing?
Like the
Yeah, I mean, are they doing, do you know if they're doing the same kind of research that you're doing, or they doing different techniques? Do you have any inkling at all?
right. I will say, like sports science is definitely like a new field, and a lot of like I don't know exactly like what each program has. I know it's like really popular in like football and baseball right now, and that's kind of where it's growing strong. So I'm not sure if they're a women's soccer team or their basketball team. Although they have strong soccer programs, I'm not sure exactly. But I know that we just can't get their like catapult data, but we have all their data in terms of like goals, passing, all their match data. But yeah.
Right, but you don't know if they're doing, so the kind of research you're doing on your own players, you don't know if they're doing that research on their players.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel good at kind of like analyzing reporting match and like just actually measuring it that way, but it's gonna be less accurate than having someone on there.
So, you know, you've got those, what did you call the things that they wear on their bodies that,
It's kind of like a sports bra.
yeah, but it's, I forget what you call it, but it makes all these measurements, right, for speed and whatnot.
Accelerometer.
How often do they, how often do those things give off data points? Because I think I heard somewhere from somebody like a student a few years ago, that they've got these spreadsheets that are just unbelievably big. You know,
Right.
It's just a huge amount of data.
For individual data points, I'm not exactly sure. I know that you have to have like at least 1 second like continuous movement. Because then it's like if not, you're kind of like not functioning with the technology a little bit. For us, we look at it like split. So like we split our games up like a certain way, our practice up a certain way over like a time interval. So like we're not looking at like individual points. We're just like summing them up, essentially.
When you're like measuring the speed, are you measuring how long they're at that speed for as well?
Catapult is already giving us that metric, yeah. In with the very high speed distance, or in the high speed distance, it's the number we're getting is like if you could see this right here, this is a miles, this is a meters. It's just giving us a distance that you're staying at speed. Yeah.
So is like the meta between different colleges, is it really just coming down to who has the faster players, or is there still like a degree of strategy where like a team that has slower players but better strategy so win?
Right. I guess that's kind of what we're trying to look at right now. Like kind of the idea for this project came from one of the strength and conditioning staff who works with the soccer team. It was like, oh, it seems like this team is really fast, and it seemed like they were faster than us. And then that's kind of where we got into this, like this project or these projects. But I would say with soccer, like not necessarily that like speed controls the game. I guess it's more how you play, but that's kind of what we looked like. It does speed control the game.
Like I guess that is a strategy. Like if you have people who are just way faster than everybody else, then you're gonna have.
Right.
How do you find out about this?
This internship?
Yeah.
So I found out through like a few math majors, just like they just texted random in one of like the group chats we have for students. Also I know like a few people who work with me now. So I know my boss, Jason, sometimes sends out interest forms to a few departments, and then they usually send it out to all the math majors. So there might be one coming out again, but if not, you can just send like request an interest email if you're interested in something like this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Let's thank Heather.
Thank you.
So, okay, next, we're going to hear from Jordan Stanfield, who's going to tell us about her uncommon teaching fellowship. So I'll help you get started off. So you want to call it your. Okay, sounds good. All right.
Okay, so last year I was a double major in secondary education and math, so I had a great opportunity to do a teaching fellowship in New York this past summer. Now I'm just a math major, but at the time I was not a major. So again, I was a Uncommon School Summer Teaching Fellow. I was placed at Uncommon Collegiate Charter High School in Brooklyn. There were about 100 of us fellows in my cohort in various locations. We had Brooklyn, Camden, New Jersey, Boston, Massachusetts, and it was like 2 more places, and they're all in North. And again, each replaced a school and assigned a mentor teacher their subject. And the kind of mission statement for Uncommon Schools is to just bridge the educational and opportunity gaps and to prepare underrepresented and low-income students to graduate from college. Okay, so I'm going to focus a little bit more on the educational aspect of things just because I was algebra and I'm sure most of you guys know something about algebra. So kind of the structure of Uncommon, it's a charter school again, so there's not much leniency in terms of like putting your personality into teaching or students like in terms of changing up their learning styles, or like for example, students aren't allowed to like sit in groups. So these 2 pictures were actually their first times ever working in groups, and they go to school from September to June, and this was in May. So they were really excited to do this instead of sitting in rows. But another thing about Uncommon is all lesson plans for the entire year are given to teachers in advance, and they're actually not allowed to edit these plans, and they have to turn them in a week in advance to administration, kind of like annotated, internalized, just to get approval and make sure they're not like changing up anything or making any drastic changes. Yeah, very structured learning. So I know this is blurry, but we had to scan all of our work, so I don't have any like hard copies. But this is just an example of a lesson internalization that I did. And you can see like everything is very scripted, and you have literally minute by minute what you should be doing and what you should be covering. So this is how like a teacher would internalize, just highlighting and making sure you kind of understand what's going on with the lesson. And this was a unit on trigonometry. Oh, another thing I was going to say. So another interesting thing I didn't really agree with that Uncommon did. The teachers don't really have educational backgrounds or like subject specific degrees. Just because they are given like all the materials for the entire year. So like my mentor teacher was a criminal justice major, no educational background, no math background. But he was passionate about math, so he was allowed to teach it. And given all the materials, we didn't really have to like learn or have much expertise. So again, very interesting. And then this is another example of an internalization. I actually got like points docked for this one just because again I kind of put my personality into it. But this was about 3 weeks into the program, so I had kind of learned my students a little bit and learned their learning styles and how they were picking up information and learning the best. But I probably didn't like that. I didn't use like the exact guided practice. But what I want to point off on this slide is another practice that they use across all their schools. It's called explore, task, and check for understanding. And how that works is they'll be given the students a question and they'll all be working on it at the exact same time. And the teacher takes laps around the classroom at different parts of the question. to make sure students are like on task. So like this top one is an example of my first lap. So I would go around and check that students found the least common multiple and that they listed excluded values. And if they didn't, I would put a tally mark in that box. And according to Uncommon, you move on if 60% of your students understand. Again, don't really agree with it because, yeah, but you move on if 60% understand and you stop and discuss a little bit more if less than 60% understand. And that will be a first lap. And then I had like a second lap right here. But again, still very scripted, very structured learning. Really different than I learned that in public schools, but that's just like the charter school way. And then on this one, I wanted to point out another thing that Uncommon does. So again, as I stated, they all sit in rows, so there's no like collaboration. Group work is highly discouraged. So they do turn-in talks, which is just 30 seconds of turning and talking to the person right next to you. So like this turn-in talk was, what must we remember anytime we saw rational equations? So they would turn and talk for 30 seconds, then come back. But that was probably the most collaboration they were allowed. And this is all subjects, not just math. And these are just some of the algebra topics that we covered. Again, I'm sure you guys have done these your entire lives, but linear equations and functions, quadratic equations, complex numbers, polynomials and radical expressions, and then evaluating equations and inequalities. And these are some of my biggest takeaways. Probably the thing I learned most, honestly, was just being intentional when talking about math is very important. Just because teaching, we're trying to stress that why behind things and not just, the computations of the algebra. So I just put a little example that I found myself kind of struggling with is using like the word substitution instead of plug-in, just because it helps us understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then I just put a little example. If we had a function like f of x equals, and we want to evaluate it at x equals 5, we would say to solve it, we substitute 5 in for x. And again, that just helps us understand the why behind all mathematical concepts and practices. I also learned that teaching math is much different than learning math. You really have to understand these concepts fully and thoroughly. And then that's why we say teaching and learning go hand in hand. And also, I'm sure many of your professors and teachers told you one of the best ways to learn math is to try and teach another individual. Because if you can teach another individual, you definitely understand the material. And then the last thing, as I'm sure you guys all see, public, private, and charter schools are all very different, especially in terms of quality of education. The one thing I definitely saw with Uncommon students is, yes, they're in these rigorous classes, but they're not performing well on tests. Because again, the learning is very, very structured. They can't really stay away from that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Really cool internship. I would do it again, just probably at like a public school, so I could like put my own swing on things, but yeah, very grateful for the opportunity.
Questions? After that experience, do you have ideas for how you put together your own lesson?
Not this way. I think math is learned or all students learn differently. So definitely encouraging group work, partner work, not lecturing the entire time, more practice. So yeah, things like that.
My experience, it's better when a person understands it on an instinctual level more than. I agree with you. Gotta get direction.
Was there a reason they couldn't sit in groups? In that chain, y'all got there, they let them sit in groups.
It's just like the uncommon way. This is across like all their schools. Every single classroom is set up the same. Like it's very like a village, like a military. Like there's like people on the floor, they walk in like a straight line, they get checked from head to toe every morning. An experience.
What is, can you, and this is gonna be a very naive and silly question, what exactly is a charter school? This is a buzzword that I hear all the time.
Yeah, it's just, it's still funded by state and it still has state and federal funding, but they operate like on their own.
Okay.
And so it's just that this particular one was operating in this.
Yeah, their entire, like, it's a branch of, like, they have elementary, middle, and high schools, and they just all operate the exact same. So a lot of these kids will go to elementary schools or like public or private high schools, and then apply and get into Uncommon and stay there until they graduate. I only saw a few kids that started there in elementary and then went all the way up to high school.
Okay, like 30-minute talks, was that even like actually completed? And then it's only like 30 seconds.
30 seconds out.
Yeah.
It's just to say, like, we're incorporating some type of. Part of the word. But yeah, it's not, to me, not a very good school system. And again, their biggest goal is to have everyone like, you know, go to college. But when you look at the statistics of like how many kids make it through and graduate, it's very, very low. Like they put like numbers everywhere. 99% of our kids got accepted, and like a lot of them don't go, a lot of them graduate. So
Yeah, after going through that for however many years, you see college and you're like, I don't want to.
So what kind of degree will charter school provide? What kind of degree will the charter school provide?
Like a GED.
For bachelor degree or master's degree?
No, it's like high school.
Yeah.
It's like a high school.
High school.
Yeah, so here we got elementary school, middle school, and high school. And so like that's what everybody goes to. And if you get to the end of high school, you get a high school diploma. Or if you drop out of high school, you can go back and get called a GED. So probably the charter school either gives a high school diploma or we. I'm sure it's last round.
you get a
Generally speaking, elementary school and middle school, we don't get any of those. Well, maybe. That's pretty good diplomas.
No, not my day. The problem is middle school is not well defined. Right, I mean, there's some go through sixth grade, some go through even ninth, well, sometimes they call it junior high. And different systems, even different schools in the same system, in the same county system, like. This high school might have a junior high and this one doesn't.
Yeah, I was saying like elementary school goes up to sixth grade and then it's straight. Right.
Okay, any other questions?
Is that part of their program to go September to June? Just, okay.
And their school days are also like 7 to 4. It's crazy.
Yeah, my wife is Chinese and she said that they went to school very late, but I think they had like a really long lunch break. She would go home from like noon to 2 or something like that, and then they go back to 6 at night or
They have a
something.
90-minute lunch.
So it's long.
Yeah,
Well, let's think, George.
but it's not.
All right. Well, everybody, stay tuned for next week. I hope everybody has a grand weekend and we'll see you then.